I'll begin with, it was a Thursday afternoon, January 22nd, and I was a young girl, and I had blonde hair, if you can imagine. It's amazing what happens over the years. Anyway, I was a young girl, I had blonde hair and freckles, and I always walked everywhere back then. I always walked to and from school, and it was a typical afternoon. I had just gotten out of school, and I had found myself traveling home after school, and I always had this list of duties that I had to get done after school for my mother before she came home from work. And so I'd always get home, and I found at that age I already enjoyed the quiet household. I felt like it was my own house, felt like I had control of it, and I enjoyed the few hours that I had it to myself even back then. And so I was just frolicking about in the house doing whatever it was that I wasn't supposed to be doing, right, chores. And all of a sudden, 15 minutes after I'd gotten home, the phone rang. And it was my mom, and my mom says to me, "Honey, there's somebody that's going to be coming by the house, and it was, they came to my home office yesterday, and they're a client, and so they lost their wallet." And I said, "Okay." And she says, "And, his name is Joey. He's going to be coming by the house. He'll be there in about 15 minutes, and I need you to look everywhere in the office there and see if you can find his wallet." And she said, "So just make sure, he'll probably be by soon, just make sure to let him in." So she had given me express permission to let Joey in the house and to try and find this wallet. And so, of course, I hung up the phone, and she was rushed, and I thought, okay, I'm going to have to find what this is that she's describing to me, and I didn't even know what it would look like. And so I turned under the sofa and the pillows, and I'm looking behind things, and I'm just like frantically thinking, gosh, the time's passing, and I don't know where this guy's wallet is, and I keep looking, and boy, he's going to be here soon, and I can't find his wallet. What am I going to tell him? And so ultimately, before I knew it, the door rang. The doorbell. And so the doorbell rang, and sure enough, there's this man, Joey, and he's standing there. He's about 6 foot tall. He's probably in his 30s. He had blonde hair, tan coat, blue jeans. And I said to him, "I'm so sorry. My mom said that you had lost your wallet." And so I looked everywhere. I really can't find the wallet. "But why don't you come in and take a look for yourself, because you know what you're looking for." And so he came in, and he's looking around things, and I just sat myself down on a sofa. And I literally was waiting for him and hoping that he'd find his wallet, because certainly I hadn't done any good there. And as I sat there, all of a sudden I found that he had sat down next to me. And before I knew it, I kind of kept saying to him, "Well, I'm guessing my mother will call you. Maybe we'll find it. It'll turn up." And as I'm saying that, Joey sat down next to me, and before I knew it, he had basically put himself on top of me, and he started kissing me. And I was absolutely perplexed by the sudden nature of this person kissing me. I didn't even know what it was, to be quite honest. And I kind of just swiped my mouth away, and I pushed him off of me, and I said, "What are you doing? What are you doing? I don't understand what you're doing." And as a talker as I was talking just as much as I am now then. And I just kept talking. And I kept saying, "What are you doing? I don't understand what you're doing." And as I'm talking and I'm questioning what's going on, he just sweeps me up, and he picks me up, and he takes me to the bathroom. And in the bathroom, I find that he lays me down. And before I knew it, I was basically naked. And ultimately, I'm still perplexed, and I'm still saying to him, "What are you doing? I don't understand what's happening here." And by the grace of God, he was having difficulty, of course. And I truly was absolutely perplexed. I had no idea what was happening. And it happens so fast that you don't have time to think. And as I continued to just question this individual, and I felt no fear, I just felt frantic questioning because I didn't understand. And he picked me up again, and he took me into my mother's room, and at this point the panic started to come across my heart. And not because of what was happening in the moment of the situation with this individual, but because my mother's room was off limits to me in a certain way. And she'd always kept it her sacred space, and I shouldn't be in my mother's room. And so I started thinking, oh my gosh, I'm in my mother's room, and we're in my mother's room, we shouldn't be in my mother's room. And as I'm thinking this, I look over to the clock, and I see the clock, it says 5:12 p.m. And suddenly, the horror comes over me. It's 5:12 p.m. My mother's going to be home any minute. She was always home by 5:30. "You have to leave. You have to leave right now. My mom's coming, and she's going to be so mad at me because I didn't get my chores done, and I'm going to be in trouble. So you have to go. You have to go right now," is what I said. And I ultimately was more horrified about the fear of my mother, not still what was happening to me. And ultimately, he got really forceful with me because I was adamant about the fact that my mother was going to be home any minute. And he pushed me down to my knees, and he was totally forceful with me to the point that before I knew it, there was mess everywhere, and I had no idea what was happening. And in an instant, he jumped up, he got dressed, and he looked at me with full heart, and he said, "I'm truly sorry." And he walked out. And in the adrenaline rush of that moment, I just knew that what had happened was wrong. I knew it wasn't right. And I knew in that instant right away I would tell my mother as well. I was a child that knew right away that I would tell my mother. Because surely I had to have a good excuse for not getting my chores done. to be quite honest. And so ultimately, in that moment of adrenaline, I knew that I had to get out of the house. I put on my clothes, and we lived in a condominium at the time on a big cliff. And so there's bushes, and you open the door, and then you can see through these little holes in the bushes where they have the lights for people when they're walking at night. And I could see all the way down the foothills. At the time we lived in California, all the way down the foothills to a taxi cab that had been waiting for him. And so I peered through the bushes, and I basically watched this man get into a cab and then take off. And then I ran to the neighbor's house, and I told the neighbors that I'd been assaulted. Before my mother had even come home, the police had arrived, and it was completely corridored off. And I remember just the shock and horror in her eyes. And I don't know that I'll ever know how that truly felt to her as her daughter. But I can say that that night when we got into the police car and we drove to the station, and they told me that they had identified the individual because I had been able to identify the cab, and of course my mother knew this individual. They had already arrested him. I ended up realizing through the days that followed, my mother's words were matched by her actions, and she said to me, "You are not a victim. Just because people see you as a victim, you are not a victim. You are here because God made you special, and you're a special child, and you will do amazing things. And don't ever forget that. Don't ever walk around like you're a victim." And it was her actions and her words that really matched that. She never blamed anyone or any person or thing for what happened to me. I was a child who testified in court and that told the truth. And ultimately went back to life as normal, whatever that means. And as I was back in my normal life, people would say, "How do you move through trauma? How do you come out of trauma and still feel whole?" And I can tell you that over the years I've learned that coming out of trauma really is about learning from it and then embracing it and then letting it go. And that's a process. And ultimately at the young age I didn't know all of that. And so within 6 months I ultimately fell ill. It was the 4th of July, and I remember my mother was yelling, as mothers do with their children, "Keep up, let's go, come on, you're taking forever." And I'm trying to keep up with her, and I was yards behind her at the time. And I remember feeling great physical pain. And I had fatigue and stiffness, and I just couldn't move, and it got to the place where I could barely walk. And so my mother took me to the hospital. And my mother's a healer. The last place she would take me is to the hospital if you knew her. Some of you in the room do know her. And so for her to take me to the hospital was a big move. And I remember her kind of threatening with me with it. "I'm going to take you to the doctors, and they're going to give you a bunch of tests, and they're going to poke and prod at you." And I said to her, "Good, I hope they find out what's wrong with me." And so ultimately I went to the hospital, and they admitted me at the time, and I basically was there for a number of weeks while they did tests. And ultimately I was diagnosed with junior rheumatoid arthritis, articular, which means that I had junior rheumatoid arthritis in all of my joints. And it affects about 50,000 children every year who are under the age of 16. And I could sit there and just go with the facts that I had this kind of DNA thing happen to me, and I had this physical illness. But I've come to the place in my life today where I will tell you that it absolutely wasn't just that, because I'm standing before you perfectly fine right now wearing high heels, and I feel quite good. I can tell you that ultimately I came to the place where I realized that I had trapped negative energy. And by choosing to take the negative things and our thoughts and our heart and our power, our personal power, and you can devote to change it and put it towards something that's negative energy and harbor that. Or you can choose to turn it into the positive light and the positive choices and harbor it over here. And I really learned through all of that I had the choice to ultimately harbor hostility or harbor benevolence. As I tell my husband every day, benevolence, he knows that. And I truly learned that lesson that day. And my mother was really shell-shocked by the fact these two things had happened to me in a period of less than 6 months. And she ultimately changed our whole life. She literally left a place where she'd grown up her entire life in California, her comfort, her network, etc. And she did one of these. "I think I'll raise my children in Montana." And she moved us there. And I grew up in one of the most beautiful valleys you'll ever step foot in if you have the opportunity to go in the Big Sky Country, Montana. And I walked into the 5th grade classroom, and guess what my mother gave me? The best gift you could ever give a child who feels like a victim. Nobody knew who I was. Nobody knew where I came from. And my mother told me I could go to school and I could be anybody I wanted to be that day. And I did. And many people who grew up with me don't even know this story. And the first time I spoke it publicly was in Kentucky, and second time to you. I can tell you that ultimately, you grew up in a small town and the first thing you want to do is get out, and that explains ultimately how I transitioned to our neck of the woods. And I can tell you that that benevolence choice has a double-edged sword, so to speak. So when you have benevolence in your heart, you can ultimately look towards everything as good and true. And since I chose that so intently, I went right into my early 20s, meeting just, the first guy I saw, I think, in a plaid shirt that had a beard, and it looked like some guy that hunted back home. I thought he was my love. I don't know, maybe some of you have a similar story. And I ultimately was with this individual and thought that that was love. And I traveled home during the holidays quite a few times, and I went home to see my mother, and she explained to me the younger brother that I have, my sole younger brother, 7 years younger than me. He was 13 years old at the time, I was 20, was getting into trouble. And he was hanging out with the wrong kids and the wrong crowd, and she didn't know what she was going to do about that. And for whatever reason, I took it as my responsibility. And so I literally looked at her and I said, I have a stable job, I have a stable home. At the time I was engaged to my fiance, and we had a home in the suburbs here. And I literally said, I want him to come home with me. And in less than 15 minutes, my mother and I decided that I would become the guardian of my 13-year-old brother, and he would move to Illinois with me, and we hopped on a train, and within a matter of a week, he was mine, and we were here. In the time that you have a child in front of you, those of you that are parents, and you have children in your life, or you've had children around you, and you've been in unhealthy relationships, it's interesting how suddenly it becomes more present to you. When it's just you and a child, or you and that maybe dysfunctional relationship, and nobody sees it, well, then nobody sees it. But when the child's present in the room, which was my brother at the time at an impressionable young age, I started to realize that my fiance might not be the guy that's right for me. I started to see him differently. And as I was contemplating all of that, I was working full-time and going to school full-time. I'm kind of a busybody. And so I was at work one morning, and I look out the front window, and I kid you not, I'm watching my cute little Toyota Celica that I love so much just get towed away. Somebody was repossessing my car. I thought, my goodness. And I didn't even know what that was back then. So, of course, I'm calling people very near and dear to me, some of them in this room even, and I'm accusing people of, they stole my car, and I don't know why they took my car, and why would they take my car? I send my payments. How in the hell? Somebody get an attorney on the phone. I need an attorney right now. So I'm all feisty and fired up. And then before I get off the phone with the bank, and these people, they're telling me they didn't get my payments, and I'm thinking, how's that possible? How's that possible? So then I realize, oh, that's right. My boyfriend, my fiance at the time, makes all our payments. I give him my money, he puts it in the bank, et cetera. I have to find him. So then I went looking for him, and of course he was on a lake, and he was fishing, and he was drinking, and I didn't know that. He hadn't been working. I didn't know that. I think the ring that he bought for me at the time was literally with my own money that he didn't pay for my car payment. Yes. So in a short period of time, I found myself leaving everything. And I was in an apartment, 21 years old, asking myself, what in my life allowed me to wear blinders? What in my life allowed me to actually create a relationship such as this, where I almost married a closet alcoholic, and I'm sitting in an apartment with an egg crate, 2 fern plants, and my young brother, going to PTA meetings, working 2 jobs to feed him, and saying I'm taking care of a child I didn't give birth to. And at 21 years old, I really had to ask myself a hard question, which is, how did I put myself in this position? Because only me put myself in this position. So I did the hard work. I took 6 months, and I really asked myself, how did I put these blinders on, and what would I do to actually take these blinders off? And what I had realized is that I had some codependent tendencies, which means that we actually look to people who are making poor decisions in our life, and we actually decide that their poor decisions are ours and that we can fix them, or that we can help them, or that we can do something for them, instead of holding those people accountable to the poor decisions that they're making, and making them responsible for the decisions and choices that they're making, instead of making them ours. And many of us, especially women, we do this. So 6 months after that, I realized I was going to call my mother and send my brother back home, the hardest decision I ever made. And only now does he really, truly, I think, understand that gift. But it was the hardest thing for many years because I had sent him back. And I can tell you that I freed myself of all of this expectation in relationships, where you're in a relationship because you want to feel needed, versus in that relationship because you're both mirrors of one another and help each other and support each other and give to one another and honor each other. And there's so many relationships we stay in that are unhealthy because we want to feel needed. And what we need to know is that we're just sustaining and self-sustaining and beautiful on our own. Sometimes we need to kind of look at that and realize that in whatever unhealthy situation we're in. So once I did that, I was in a really good place, actually. I was in my early 20s. It's fabulous when you're in your early 20s and you have a good career and you're doing what you love to do. And I was going to school, and I finally was a student during the day. I didn't know what that was like. I'd always win at night. And I was kind of anti-male at the time, to be quite honest. I didn't want a relationship. And of course, that's when God's on your side. God's on your side, decided to show you love is in your corner, and love will prove you wrong. And ultimately, that's God always talking to us. There's always, when we think something's not what we want, it shows up on your doorstep, and definitely when you don't want it there. And I'm very fortunate to say that when love walked right in front of me, I knew that it was definitely different when my husband walked in front of me. But I can tell you that I had fear, and it definitely takes a lot of time for all of us to overcome fear. And I can tell you that fear, in order to overcome fear, you have to really work through your friends and your network and people around you, and be open to letting them know that you're fearful so that they can help you see actually how strong and beautiful you are. And at the time, I knew that when he had asked me to dinner, I definitely knew that was more than dinner, and I still wasn't interested because it was more than dinner, and I didn't know if I was ready for more than dinner. And you know, you crack up knowing that I'm in HR and what I do for a living, because you guys, I actually went to the extent of calling an employee that worked for him. And I checked his references. And only then did I actually respond to his email and give him my number. And I can tell you that I still didn't let loose. As women or as men, do we really let people into our hearts and see us really bare? Right? My husband loves me best, you guys, when this makeup's gone, when my heels are off, when my hair is a mess, right? Just really letting you into your world and your heart and who makes you who you are. And I think I still didn't let him in, even after 3 months of dating and after him revealing that he loved me, until 9/11. It took a tragic event in our country for me to actually realize he was the first person I thought of, and that it's the person that I should be with and that I loved him as well. And it takes a lot of tragedies every single day for people to realize and say out loud how they really feel. And I can tell you that that moment for me changed the trajectory of what I was going to do, and it helps me overcome fear. And that night, Brian and I went out to dinner, and I told him I loved him for the first time. And it's this honor to all those people who've been died or gone past. Just, we all have to really live in that present moment. And when we're in the present moment with you, and when I see you, and I see how beautiful you are, and you see me, and we're together, it's in this present moment that we have control over. It's not tomorrow. And it's not whatever happened yesterday. And we shouldn't be living in yesterday with whatever we're carrying with us. And so ultimately, I was blessed with love. And I can tell you that when you're empowered by unconditional love, it does things for you. So those of you who've known my life and been with me, there came a point where I was very empowered. And I became very empowered probably about the time that unconditional love came into my life, because I really went into work not to put a roof over my head and just for the sake of a job and money. I really went in to do good work with my hands and my gifts, and to actually feel integrity in that experience of my God-given gifts and living in service. And in about 2012, I learned that truth talking in business really can take you places. And I truly look back at that time. We had come through an experience where we were blessed with our first son. And as a mother, I can tell you I've never felt closer to God than when you become a mother. But when I became a mother with my firstborn child, I can tell you that I had such gratitude that I almost went into ministry work. And my husband doesn't ask me for a whole lot, but I remember the conversation we sat, and I told him that I wanted to go into ministry work. My hormones had balanced. I'd been done breastfeeding. I decided that I was bored. So I decided, I'm going to go and do this. And he looked at me and he said to me something really poignant. If you know my husband, when he speaks, it's been thought out. And so I listened. And he said, honey, I really see you do your work and you love your work. You come alive in your work. And yeah, the church is the church and it has its needs and it has all the things that you could do good things there too. Your first sacrament, of course, is to our family and to our boys. And I want you here with me. And I want you to do your good work. And it was that day that I manifested through him speaking to me that I do workplace ministry. And that workplace ministry is what I do every day through what we do at HR Boost and through the clients that we touch. But it was in that conversation with my husband, the gift of unconditional love and someone seeing your gifts and setting you free, that I was given that gift. So of course, 8 years go by. I have a team of 15, 2 babies. I don't know. I pretty much look back, and at that point in time, I'd hit a place of contentment, quite a bit of contentment, where you feel like you hit all your goals that you ever painted for yourself. And so you have to start dreaming bigger, which some of us don't dream bigger naturally. And so I started thinking, gosh, I have to start dreaming bigger. But really, I realized I'm so content, I have to really kind of just be with my subconscious. And for those of you that don't know, your subconscious talks to your conscious mind every 3 seconds. Your subconscious mind is feeding your conscious mind. And what's fascinating about that is I don't know that I ever took time, because I move so fast, you guys, I don't know if I ever took time to actually hear my subconscious mind. And of course, it's in the quiet, sleepless nights of being with your children, if you've ever had the blessed gift, to be present with a child, a newborn in your arms, and have this miracle in your arms, that it's silent and it's the most peaceful place you can be. And suddenly I heard my subconscious. And my subconscious started giving me all kinds of memories of things that I hadn't thought about for over 20 years. And all of a sudden, I was thinking about my childhood memories, and I started realizing, you know, it just doesn't make sense. I had a call when I was 18. Gosh, I forgot about that call, and this is when I was in my 30s. And I'm literally holding a child, having this flashback memory. And I believe that your subconscious gives you what you need when you need it, and when you're ready to handle it, when you're feeling safe enough to process that. So I was given that gift. And I remembered suddenly that a man called me when I was 18, the minute I turned 18, in fact, and he declared that he was my father. And I was raised by a single mother, and my mother told me my whole life that my father was dead. And I took that call, I remember, at the age of 18, and I thought, okay. And the man was telling me he was a truck driver and that he was going to drive cross country, he'd be in our neighborhood, and that he's moved on from the times, his rough times, whatever those were, and that he would be in my neighborhood, and that he has a family now, and he has a young daughter who wants a sister. And she's in middle school, so he decided to tell her that she does have a sister, and that was me. And in the shock and horror of hearing that, all I could process was that that can't be true. That's a lie, because it's not what my mother told me, and my mother doesn't lie to me. She still doesn't. And I can't live that lie to this little girl and tell her that I'm her sister if I'm not her sister. So no, sorry, you can't come drop off the little girl at my house, and I can't take this call, and I hung up the phone. And all of a sudden, as I'm holding this child in my arms, I felt that call. And I realized there's a little girl out there in the world who's feeling shut down, who thinks that her sister doesn't want anything to do with her. And whether I'm her sister or not, that has affected that girl's life, probably deeply. And so I told my husband about it as it occurred, as I had these thoughts. And my husband was kind of like, do you want to open that can of worms? He's more cautious than I am. And I kind of decided, I don't know, I'm going to look into it a little bit. So of course I asked my mother again, and she stuck with her story. And then I had another story come to my mind of when I was sent away for a week to actually stay with his mother and his brother. And I thought, as I held my small children, as a mother now, I could feel there's no way I would send my children to stay with you if you weren't family, especially out of state. So there were so many things that just weren't making sense for me. And finally, there was one thing I wanted more from God, and that was Joseph. And God blessed Brian and I with Joseph. He's a beautiful miracle baby to me and to Brian, our family. And in my private conversation with God, because that's how my mother raised me, I talk directly to God daily. I don't know about you guys, but that's my deal. I said to God, thank you so much. Just give me a year. I just need a year to be present in this moment with this baby and my family. And I promise, in gratitude, I will go solve this, and I will go find the truth. So Father's Day came around, about a year. And I felt that tap, like from your spiritual guides, just like, you promised you're going to go do this. And okay, I'm going to buck up and get brave, and I'm going to go do this. And I'm going to go open this can of worms. And many of us choose not to open our cans of worms. And I decided I was going to do it. And I told my husband I was going to do it, and I asked him to support me and be strong with me. And I needed that. And I went on Facebook. It's amazing what you can do with social media, you guys. Woo! I went on Facebook, and I typed her name. And there she was. It's just that easy. And I sent her a message right away. And I said, I'm the girl that you were told I was your sister. And I don't know if that's true, but I'm willing to go and find the answer to that right now with you. And then we spoke for about 6 months online. Blow by blow, blow by blow by blow. The first response, for example, was her saying, "Oh my God, it's so exciting, yes, yes, yes." And then she texted me back a picture of myself at the age of 18, which was my high school graduation picture on her living room wall. Blow by blow, I worked through all of her things from her perspective in her life. And I discovered that her father, who I didn't believe to be my biological father, was dying. He was terminally ill. And he'd been terminally ill for about 3 years. And we came to this place, each time she'd send me a message, it was where time froze. I would literally be sitting maybe in the office at home, and Brian would eventually come and find me, and I had lost maybe 3 hours because I had just been sitting there thinking and asking all those questions to all these things that you never knew about your life that suddenly didn't make sense, and there's another story. And as you're moving through that, it is mind-blowing. And I kept moving through it until the day when a business connection who's not in this room and probably doesn't even know how powerful he was in my life, I trusted him to send the DNA test. And I gave it to my supposed sister on her birthday. And I said, today we're going to do a paternity test. It was November 2nd, a year ago tomorrow. And I said to her, we'll get the answer to this before Thanksgiving. So she facilitated all of that in the weeks before our father essentially became ill. And she didn't know the truth and I didn't know the truth, but my business connection sent me the DNA test results on Thanksgiving morning. And he said, I hope these are the results that you were looking for, Nicole. And I opened it and it said that man was 99.9% my biological father. And I didn't even feel anything when I saw it. I was numb. And I even had Thanksgiving dinner with my mother and I didn't speak of it. And Brian and I were driving up north the next day for Thanksgiving with his family. And I looked at my husband and in so many words I said to him, how sad is that? How deeply, deeply sad is that? And how many lives are affected by that? And I still couldn't fathom that my mother was lying to me. I couldn't wrap my head around it. So then I had come to the conclusion, of course, that she even maybe perhaps didn't know the truth. And maybe that's possible. Within the 9 days after I got the test results, our father died. And she texted me, and I spoke to my half-sister for the first time as he died at her side. And I didn't feel sadness for the lack of our relationship. I felt sadness because I heard the true loss in her voice and the healing that takes place from knowing the father he was to her. And all he ever asked of me was to be her sister. And I can do that now. In the days that followed, I knew that I was going to have to go and meet her. And I had to confront my mother. So I went to my mother, who didn't know I'd been suffering and dealing with all of this the entire year. It wasn't for her. It's not hers. It was for me, and it was how my energy was around that girl. And when I told my mother that, I had to re-explain to her that that's what this was, and that she's the one who taught me to be that human being. And it's truly in that moment when I asked her for the story the one last time. And I have a piece of paper in my hand. Last time. And she told me her whole story and all the ugly things that she protected me from, that she was trying to protect me from. And all I could give back to her, and in that moment, you guys, it's knowing that my mother's a healer. And my brother, he's a healer. He works in medicine with people. He's in EMT, he saves people's lives. He could probably save my life. And I don't see myself as a healer at all. And it's in that moment, as I was with my mother, that I actually realized not only was I helping heal something that existed in the heart of that young girl who lived her whole life thinking I had denied her, but I'm looking at my mother who thought that if she told me that truth, I wouldn't love her the same way. And that, for every parent who has a secret from your child, know that the truth will help heal your child and your child will still love you. And I was able to look back at my mother, and as she filled in all the blanks, but then she still said this other person who died was my father, I handed her the DNA results and I said, I'm sorry that the truth is not that. But I know now why you didn't tell me. And in that moment, I was the healer. I want each of you to know that each of you, we all have the right to choose to be right or wrong, to be perfect or to be imperfect, but God made us imperfect. And we all have the ability to choose hostility from a moment of something that's been done to us, or to rise from it with that positivity of knowing that we have the choice through every circumstance, through every unforeseen circumstance that's ever put before you. You have the choice to embrace it, to learn from it, to seek the truth, to actually bring the light and the radiance and the forgiveness and the love. We have that choice. And when we choose that, each of you have the opportunity, I truly believe, to be healers yourselves. And so as you embark on this upcoming holiday season, I want you to think of every rock that you haven't unturned in your life. Because your subconscious mind feels it and is speaking to you. And many of us shove it back and we don't want to go there, or it doesn't matter, or we don't think it affects us. But it's there, and it's feeding your conscious mind every 3 seconds. And I want you to listen to it and go on a beautiful journey and uncover your quest of healing and how you can heal others. And that is the reason I wrote this book and shared my story with you, because I truly believe that the radiance that you feel when you know that you've affected another human being's life that way, I could literally die tomorrow and I would have felt that I have lived a purpose deeper than anything I'd ever felt, more powerful and personal and tied to. That's the gift each of you have as well. So thank you.